My name is Julia Monroe, and I lost custody of my daughter in the middle of a backyard barbecue. One minute, she was chasing fireflies. The next, she was crying in my arms, saying Grandma told her I wouldn't be her mommy anymore. What would you do if the people you trusted most turned you into the villain, to steal the one thing you love more than life? Before I begin, tell me, where are you watching this video from? Drop it in the comments. I want to know where all the strong women out there are listening from tonight. The night was so gentle, I almost let myself relax. That was my first mistake. We were at my parents' backyard, the kind of quaint Bayport summer evening you'd find on a Hallmark card. The citronella candles flickered softly. My mother's wind chimes hummed on the porch. I'd brought Lily, my 7-year-old, dressed in her purple butterfly dress she insisted on wearing for fancy parties. She had ketchup on her cheek and bare feet stained with grass and freedom. I stood near the grill, chatting with my cousin Jordan about school shopping, keeping one eye on Lily as she flitted between cousins and fireflies like she belonged to the night sky. And then she stopped. She stopped mid-run, just froze, like a switch was flipped somewhere behind her eyes. She turned on her heel and sprinted toward me, her tiny legs moving fast, arms outstretched, panic spilling from her before her words even landed. "Mommy," her voice trembled, eyes wide, face tear-streaked. "Grandma said you're not gonna be my mommy anymore." Every sound evaporated, the clinking of forks, the laughter from the patio, even the sizzle of burgers, all of it just died. I knelt, grabbing her shoulders. "What did you say, sweetheart?" I asked. My voice was steady, but only because my body forgot how to breathe. She looked over her shoulder toward the house, then whispered so small I almost didn't catch it. "Grandma said Daddy left me a trust, and I'll be safer with them now, that I'll get used to it." It took every molecule of strength not to scream. "Who told you that?" I managed. "Grandma said that." My hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from rage coiled so tight in my chest I thought I'd collapse from it. Lily just nodded and buried her face in my shoulder. I looked up and caught my father's eyes across the yard. Paul Monroe, a man whose silence always spoke volumes. He was standing near the deck steps, drink in hand. When he saw me staring, he didn't blink. He just turned away, calmly, like a man flipping a page in a book he already knew the ending to. I didn't know what was happening yet, but I knew this, whatever it was, I wasn't crazy. I wasn't overreacting. Something had already begun, and I was just now catching up. The barbecue smoke twisted through the air, sharp and acidic. My stomach churned. The people around me, my own extended family, were laughing again, resuming conversations like nothing happened, as if my daughter hadn't just whispered the end of my entire world into my ear. I clutched her tighter, and for the first time in a long, long while, I was afraid, not of losing control, but of realizing I never had it to begin with. The house smelled like lavender and lemon from the candle I kept in Lily's room. I'd lit it out of habit when we got home, trying to pretend things were normal, but nothing felt normal anymore. Not the way Lily stayed quiet on the ride back. Not the way she avoided eye contact while brushing her teeth. Not the way her little hands kept tugging at her bunny's ears as if she was trying to pull herself into its fur and disappear. I tucked her in slowly, smoothing her hair back like I always did. "Lily," I said softly, "can we talk about what Grandma said today?" She shifted under the blanket. Her stuffed bunny, Mr. Whiskers, was clutched against her chest like a shield. "I don't know," she mumbled. "It's okay," I whispered. "You didn't do anything wrong. I just want to understand, sweetheart. What did Grandma mean about you not being with me anymore?" Her voice came out so small I almost missed it. "She said Daddy left a big trust and that I'd be safer with them, that you were. Too sad all the time, that it wasn't good for me." Her thumb crept to her mouth, a habit she hadn't had in over a year. "She said the judge would decide soon." The judge. My heart thudded in my ears. I felt my body heat spike like my skin knew something I hadn't caught up to yet. I forced a soft smile. "When did she say all this?" "At the party, before I went to play. She told me not to tell. She said if I loved you, I wouldn't want you to get in trouble." That broke me a little. Not on the outside, but somewhere quiet and private in my chest. "I'm never in trouble because of you," I whispered, kissing her forehead. "You didn't do anything wrong. You're the bravest little girl I know." She nodded, but her eyes had that look again. like she was floating somewhere far from this room, from me. "I love you," I said, brushing her bangs aside. "I know," she whispered. "But if I go live there, will I still get to visit you?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because even though my mind screamed absolutely not, something deeper whispered the unthinkable. What if they're already making it happen? She rolled over and curled into a tight ball, Mr. Whiskers tucked beneath her chin. I stayed beside her for a long time, watching, listening to her breathing settle, counting the minutes until I could fall apart without scaring her. When I finally stood and walked into the hallway, I pressed my hand to the wall to steady myself. I looked around our modest Cape Cod-style home, the one I'd fought to keep after Matthew died. The paint was chipped in the hallway, and the smoke detector battery had been chirping all week. The bathroom cabinet door hung a little crooked. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and now it felt like someone had walked through it with scissors, snipping the invisible strings that tied our lives together. I went to my room and opened Matthew's file folder in the drawer. His will. The trust fund paperwork. The documents I barely looked at because it hurt too much. Because I trusted my parents to help, not interfere. My fingers trembled. What if they'd found something? Some clause, some loophole? What if they used his memory against me? The silence in the house was loud. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat at the kitchen table staring at a bottle of Tylenol I didn't need and a glass of water I didn't drink. In the morning, I'd call the lawyer. I'd call someone. I'd do something. Because something was coming. I could feel it. But I had no idea how fast. The knock came just after 8 a.m. I was in the kitchen still in my robe, pouring Lily's cereal while she hummed from the living room, sitting cross-legged in front of the TV with Mr. Whiskers tucked into the crook of her arm. I remember that detail, how she was humming, how normal everything felt for a single, flickering moment. Then came the second knock, louder, more deliberate, the kind that doesn't wait to be invited. I opened the door, clutching my robe tighter. 2 strangers stood on my porch. A woman in a navy blazer held a clipboard. The man beside her wore a muted gray coat and didn't smile. "Julia Monroe?" the woman asked briskly. "Yes. We're from Suffolk County Child Protective Services," she said. "We're here pursuant to a court order issued at 7:12 a.m. this morning." She flipped a paper toward me, tapping her pen on the seal at the top. The words blurred. I couldn't focus on them. "I'm sorry, what?" "We've received a complaint regarding the child's well-being," she continued. "We are authorized to take temporary custody of Lily Monroe pending an investigation." I stared. No, absolutely not. There's been a mistake. You can't just show up and—" "We can, and we are," the man said flatly. "You can consult your attorney, but right now we are acting under the authority of family court. Where's the judge? Where's the hearing?" "I haven't even been notified. You were served in absentia due to emergency concerns raised in the complaint," the woman replied. "We'll explain more once the child is secured." I heard the word secured and felt like I'd been slapped. Lily's voice came from behind me. "Mommy, who are they?" I turned to see her peeking from behind the hallway, clutching Mr. Whiskers. "Lily," I said gently, swallowing my panic. "Stay right there, baby. Everything's okay." The officers stepped forward. I raised my hand, instinctively blocking the doorframe. "You're not taking her," I said, voice cracking. "You don't even know us." "We have no choice," the woman said. "Please don't make this harder than it needs to be." Harder than it needs to be, I laughed, a sound so sharp and bitter it didn't feel like mine. "You're taking my child. There's no version of this that isn't hard." "Ma'am, she's 7, I whispered. "She just lost her father 2 years ago. She cries if I'm 5 minutes late picking her up from school, and you think you can just take her, like she's a suitcase." I didn't notice Lily had come closer until her small hand wrapped around mine. "Mommy," she said, trembling. "Are they mad at me?" That was it. I fell to my knees, arms around her. "No, never. You didn't do anything wrong. Do you hear me? Not one single thing." "They let us say goodbye, if you can call it that." She sobbed as they led her out. I followed behind them barefoot, out into the morning air, numb to the sting of cold pavement. She kept turning, reaching for me, asking if I could come too. "I'll be with you soon," I promised. "I'll fix this, baby, I swear to you." The car door closed, and just like that, she was gone. I stood there in my robe as the car pulled away, the paper still in my hand flapping in the wind like some sick joke. The neighbors were out, Mr. Campbell walking his dog, the teenage twins across the street getting into their dad's truck for school. No one said anything. They just watched. I went back inside and closed the door slowly like I could somehow rewind the moment. But the silence in the house was too loud now. Her cereal bowl sat untouched. The cartoon theme song still played in the background, oblivious. Mr. Whiskers lay on the rug, abandoned. That's when I started to scream. I didn't knock. I don't even remember how I drove there. Just that I was in the car, hands shaking on the steering wheel, trying to remember to breathe. My mother's colonial-style house in Suffolk County came into view like something out of a dream I didn't want to be in. The hedges were perfectly trimmed, the lawn obsessively neat. A bluebird feeder swung gently from the porch, as if the world hadn't shifted completely off its axis. I pushed through the front door. Nancy Monroe was at the kitchen table pouring tea, not a single line out of place in her ivory sweater set. My father sat beside her, flipping through the Wall Street Journal like he didn't know his granddaughter had been taken from her home just hours earlier. My voice broke the silence. "Where is she?" Nancy didn't flinch. She stirred her tea, then set the spoon down with surgical precision. "Julia, would you like some Earl Grey? I just made a fresh pot." I stepped closer, knuckles white around my purse strap. "You know why I'm here." She finally looked up, calm, detached, her lipstick perfectly applied. "Yes, I imagine you're upset, but what happened this morning was necessary." I blinked. "Necessary? You had my daughter taken from me, and you're sitting here with lemon wedges and a porcelain teapot." Paul looked up from his paper, adjusting his glasses. "It's temporary, Julia. The court needs time to make an informed decision." I laughed, but there was no humor in it, just something hollow and splintered. "Informed? You lied. You told them I was unstable. Negligent. You filed a complaint without telling me. You didn't even talk to me first." Nancy exhaled like I was being overly emotional about a mild inconvenience. "It wasn't personal, darling. It's about what's best for Lily. She is my child." "She's also Matthew's," Paul said evenly, and his wishes were very clear. That stopped me. "What are you talking about?" He folded the paper slowly, deliberately. "Matthew left a significant trust fund for Lily. As co-trustee, I have fiduciary responsibility to ensure her well-being. If you're deemed unfit, the management structure adjusts." There it was, not in so many words, but I heard it clearly. This wasn't about Lily. This was about money. I looked back at Nancy. Her expression was unreadable. "So that's why you've been so helpful these past few years. That's why you offered to take things off my plate after Matthew died, because you were planning this." She met my eyes, voice still maddeningly level. "Julia, we've been watching you struggle. The house is barely maintained. You've been emotionally volatile. The court reviewed the affidavit, which you wrote." I slammed my hands on the table, rattling the china. "You presented yourself as the solution to a problem you invented. What kind of people do that to their own daughter?" Paul's lips pressed into a firm line. "Let's not turn this into a dramatic scene. The judge already agreed there were grounds for temporary placement." My breath caught. So they'd gone to court behind my back, had the documents ready. Judge, affidavits, probably a lawyer on retainer, all while I was brushing Lily's hair and packing her lunch. "You're monsters," I whispered. "Both of you." Nancy's voice lowered just slightly. "We're protecting Lily from your instability. You haven't been well since the funeral. We've all seen it." That broke me in a new way. "You're right," I said, straightening. "I haven't been well, but not because I'm unstable, because I was grieving, because I'm human, and because I made the mistake of thinking you were the only people I could trust." I turned to leave. "You can't win this, Julia," my father called after me. "The system's already in motion." I paused in the hallway, hand on the doorknob. "Then you'd better hope the system loves you as much as you love yourselves," I said quietly. "Because I'm not giving up, and I'm not done." It started with a phone call. A woman named Denise from CPS. Her voice was polite but firm, professional in that practiced, untouchable way. "We need to schedule a follow-up home inspection," she said. "It's part of the standard protocol after a temporary removal order." I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just said, "When?" and marked it on the fridge calendar with a black Sharpie. Thursday, 9 a.m. inspection again. I spent the entire day before scrubbing the house top to bottom. I replaced the missing battery and the smoke detector. I bought cabinet locks from the hardware store down the block. I even fixed the cracked tile in the bathroom with a kit I watched 3 tutorials for on YouTube. By the time night fell, the house smelled like lemon cleaner and effort. But none of that could scrub away the ache of silence coming from Lily's bedroom. I kept the door closed. I couldn't look at her empty bed without hearing her ask if she'd still get to visit me. I didn't sleep, just waited. When they arrived the next morning, they brought clipboards and cameras. Denise and a new agent, tall, silent, didn't offer his name. They didn't smile. They didn't ask how I was doing. They just stepped inside and started documenting. Click, the sound of a photo being taken. "Where's the medication stored?" Denise asked. "In the cabinet above the sink," I answered. "Locked." I held up the new plastic latch I'd installed. "Just did it yesterday." Click. They opened drawers, peered into corners, jotted notes. They walked into the hallway bathroom where Lily's shampoo still sat on the edge of the tub and the pink step stool stood like a tiny monument to normalcy. "Paint's peeling," the tall one said, gesturing to the corner above the baseboard. "Barely," I replied. "It's cosmetic." Click. "And this door doesn't close flush." He pressed on the bathroom door and it stuck halfway. "It's an old frame, it's never latched right." Denise didn't look up as she wrote something. "That can be a safety concern." "Safety," I repeated, feeling my voice rise. "A sticky door is a safety concern now. We're required to document all potential risk factors." I looked around, at the newly scrubbed floors, the functioning smoke alarms, the locks, the quiet corners of a house that had held birthdays, flu nights, homework meltdowns, love. "Lily's lived here since she was born," I said. "This is her home. She knows every creak in the stairs, every squeaky drawer." Denise glanced up, neutral. "It's not a judgment, Ms. Monroe, it's protocol." I swallowed hard. "You know what else is protocol? Not taking a child from her mother without even asking questions." She didn't answer, just nodded toward the living room. They spent another 10 minutes photographing everything from my fridge contents to a stain on the living room carpet where Lily had once spilled grape juice during a movie night. Click, click, click. By the time they left, I was holding my breath like a diver underwater. Once the door shut, I leaned back against it and slid to the floor. I had followed every rule, every correction, every quiet suggestion buried in their clipboard language, and none of it mattered. Because this wasn't about cleanliness or safety. This was about a story someone else had already written about me, and all I could do now was try not to drown in the pages. The Riverhead family court building was small, almost unassuming, like an insurance office someone had repurposed for hearings. Inside, though, it smelled like old paper and disinfectant and heartbreak. Everything echoed. Shoes on tile. Doors opening and closing. Even whispers. I sat on a hard wooden bench in the hallway outside courtroom 2B, clutching the edge of my worn tote bag like a life raft. Inside were the documents I'd frantically gathered, Lily's pediatrician records, photographs of our home before and after I'd scrubbed it, the receipt for the cabinet locks I'd installed. Proof. Evidence. My voice in paper form. I'd called 3 different legal aid numbers the night before, but no one could take a case on such short notice. The earliest appointment I could get with a pro bono attorney was next Tuesday. Today I had no one, just me. When they called my name, my knees barely held me. I walked into the courtroom and everything slowed. The walls were beige. The judge's bench rose above us, a dark block of wood that made everyone else feel smaller. My parents sat at a table on the left, flanked by 2 attorneys in navy suits. They looked like they were at a conference, not a custody hearing. My mother had a pearl brooch pinned to her blazer. My father had his hands folded neatly, his glasses glinting in the overhead lights. They didn't look at me. On the right side of the room, a CPS representative sat with a thin stack of papers. She gave me the briefest nod, the kind people give when they've already decided something. I took my place at the opposite table alone. "All rise," the bailiff called. The judge entered, a woman with a calm, unreadable face. We sat. My heart raced so loud it almost drowned out the words. "This is the matter of Monroe versus Monroe, docket number 21 FC 479. Petitioners Paul and Nancy Monroe requesting temporary custody of minor child, Lily Monroe, the clerk read aloud. The judge glanced at my parents' attorneys. Proceed, their lawyer spoke first. Polished. Smooth. Your Honor, this is not an adversarial action. My clients have grave concerns for their granddaughter's well-being given Ms. Monroe's ongoing emotional instability and environmental hazards documented in the home. They've stepped in purely out of concern for the child's safety. Environmental hazards, emotional instability. The words hung in the air like they belonged to someone else. When it was my turn to speak, my mouth went dry. Your Honor, I began, I'm Lily's mother. She's my entire world. The so-called hazards they're describing are minor. A sticky bathroom door, a missing smoke detector battery, things I've already fixed. They never even asked me about them. They went behind my back. The judge raised a hand, not unkindly. Ms. Monroe, you will have an opportunity to respond fully. For now, I must base my decision on the affidavits and the court investigator's initial report. I looked at the CPS representative. She avoided my eyes. They're lying, I said, my voice cracking. They've manipulated the system because of a trust fund. They're trying to take her for financial gain. One of my parents' attorneys shook his head with rehearsed sympathy. Your Honor, this is a grieving mother lashing out. There's no evidence of misconduct, only documented concern for the child's welfare. I turned to my parents then, desperate. Mom, Dad, please, don't do this. She needs me. Nancy's lips tightened. Paul stared at the table. The judge's gavel tapped once. I've reviewed the affidavits and the temporary order already in place. Given the outstanding concerns and pending investigation, the court orders that the minor child, Lily Monroe, remain in the temporary custody of Paul and Nancy Monroe until further review. Ms. Monroe's parental rights are hereby suspended on a temporary basis, subject to reassessment after completion of the home evaluation and psychological assessment recommended by Child Protective Services. The words landed one by one like blows I couldn't dodge. Remain in custody. Suspended. Psychological assessment. I gripped the edge of the table to stay upright. My throat closed around the question I wanted to ask. How can you take my child when I haven't even been allowed to defend myself? But the judge had already moved on to scheduling the next review. When it ended, everyone stood. My parents' attorneys packed their papers. My mother smoothed her skirt. My father whispered something to the lawyer. No one looked at me. I stayed sitting until the bailiff gently touched my shoulder. Ma'am, you need to leave the courtroom now. Out in the hallway, the world tilted. The floor felt too far away. I pressed my back against the cold wall and slid down, my tote bag spilling open. Papers scattered across the linoleum, Lily's school photo, a drawing she'd made of the two of us under a rainbow, my stack of receipts and proof. They've taken her for good, I whispered to no one. The words startled me because they weren't just thought, they were spoken. Real. People passed without stopping. A man in a suit talking on his phone. A young woman pushing a stroller. Life kept moving while mine cracked apart. I gathered my papers with shaking hands and stuffed them back into the bag. Then I stood, because there was no one to hold me up, and walked out of the courthouse alone. I didn't cry that night. Not like before. Not the howling, collapsing grief I felt when they first took her. This was something else. A silence that settled deep in my bones. A numbness that coated everything like I'd been covered in wax and set aside. The house felt like a museum. Lily's cereal bowl still sat in the sink. Her pink sneakers, untouched since Tuesday, were by the door, little Velcro straps still looped loosely. I walked from room to room, not really seeing anything, just tracing the outlines of a life that used to feel whole. I sat in the kitchen for a long time. One light on, the stovetop bulb casting that dull yellow glow over the counter where Lily used to sit and draw while I made dinner. Her latest picture was still up on the fridge. A stick figure version of us holding hands beneath a purple sun. She'd given me a crown. I wondered if she still saw me that way, or if they were already rewriting me in her mind. I pulled out my phone, not to text, not to call, just to do something. I didn't have money for lawyers. I didn't have a team. But I had a voice. And if the system wasn't going to listen to it in court, maybe, just maybe, someone out there would listen outside of it. I set the phone on the kitchen table and flipped the camera to front-facing. My reflection startled me, hair unbrushed, eyes red, no makeup, no performance, just me. I hit record. "My name is Julia Monroe," I began. "And 3 days ago, my 7-year-old daughter was taken from me by Child Protective Services without warning." My voice shook, but I didn't stop. I was told there were concerns, that my house wasn't up to code, that I was emotionally unstable. But none of that is true. What's true is that my parents, Paul and Nancy Monroe, petitioned for custody behind my back. And what they didn't tell the court is that they're co-trustees of a $2.2 million fund my late husband left for our daughter, and that they only get control of it if I'm declared unfit. I paused, staring into the lens. This isn't about safety. It's about money, about control, and I have no idea how far they're willing to go to keep it. I looked down for a second, then lifted Lily's drawing off the fridge and held it up to the camera. "This is my daughter. Her name is Lily. She loves dinosaurs and chocolate chip pancakes and singing Taylor Swift off-key while she brushes her teeth. She's not just some checkbook. She's a child who belongs with her mother." My throat tightened. "They're trying to erase me, and I can't let them." "I won't," I exhaled, holding her picture to my chest. "If anyone out there has been through this, if you know what it's like to be silenced, to be branded something you're not, to lose your child because someone richer or louder said you weren't enough, I need your help. I need your voice. I need your advice. Anything." I ended the video with a whisper. "If anyone out there can help me, I'm begging you, please don't let me disappear too." I stared at the post button for a long time. Then I tapped it. I uploaded the video to every platform I could. YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Reddit. I didn't expect miracles. I didn't expect anything, really. But I needed to feel like I'd done something. That night I sat alone in the kitchen. The house was still. No notifications came. No calls, no comments, just quiet. I thought about deleting the video, but I didn't. I turned off the light, folded my arms on the table, and rested my head beside Lily's picture. And waited. The video got 38 views in the first 2 days. Most of the comments were spam. One user told me I looked too composed to be telling the truth. Another said I should have fought harder if I was a real mother. I tried not to read them, but I did. Every single one. On the 3rd day, I stopped checking. I told myself it was over. I'd screamed into the void, and the void had shrugged. I was washing dishes, scrubbing dried pasta from a bowl Lily used to eat out of when the call came. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, figuring it was a telemarketer, but something made me check the message. "Ms. Monroe, this is Daniel Kessler. I'm a state prosecutor for Suffolk County. I came across your video and I'd like to meet." I dropped the sponge. A prosecutor. My fingers shook as I dialed back. He answered on the 2nd ring. "Ms. Monroe, thank you for returning my call." "Is this real?" I blurted. "Are you really with the prosecutor's office?" "Yes," he said simply. "I reviewed your video 3 times. And while I can't promise you an outcome, I can say something here smells off. And when something smells off, I ask questions." That afternoon, I walked into his downtown office wearing jeans and a blazer that didn't quite fit right anymore. I felt like a fraud. A mother playing dress-up as a woman people might take seriously. The receptionist offered me water. I declined. My hands were too unsteady to hold the cup. Kessler came out himself. Late 40s. Silver hair, no-nonsense eyes. He didn't smile, but he wasn't unkind. "Come in," he said, motioning toward a side office. The room was neat. File boxes along one wall. Whiteboard filled with names and red arrows. He gestured for me to sit, then played my video on a muted monitor while he reviewed printed notes. I watched myself on screen, tear-stained, desperate, asking for help. When the video ended, he turned. "How long ago did your parents petition for custody?" he asked. 3 weeks. But they filed the anonymous complaint before that. That's how they triggered the removal. "And you're sure the trust fund disbursement is conditional on you being found unfit?" "Yes, I have the paperwork. Matthew and I structured it that way to protect Lily in case anything happened to me, never thinking they'd use it against me." He nodded, jotting something down. "And who exactly is Marvin Royce?" I blinked. "Who?" "Names listed on the CPS intake form as the original complainant. Marvin Royce." "Does it ring a bell?" I shook my head slowly. "No, wait, Royce, my father mentioned that name once. He's on the board of their investment firm." Kessler's pen paused mid-stroke. "So not exactly a concerned neighbor." No, I whispered, realization dawning. They knew each other, they've worked together for years. Kessler leaned back in his chair. That's what I thought. You see, anonymous tips can come from anyone. But when those tips are substantiated with affidavits and timing that align perfectly with financial gain, people like me start asking, was this protection or premeditation? I didn't speak. I couldn't. My throat tightened around the sob that almost rose. He saw it and slid a tissue box across the table, casual but not patronizing. I'm not promising you a win, Ms. Monroe, he said carefully. But I do believe there's more to this than they're saying. And I'm not in the habit of ignoring patterns that stink. I gripped the edge of the chair. What happens now? He stood. Now I do what I do best. When Daniel Kessler pulled into my driveway, it didn't feel like a rescue. It felt like a test. I watched from the window as he stepped out of his car, dark coat, leather folder under one arm, the air of someone who didn't waste time. Not exactly warm, but not cold either. Measured. Cautious. Like a man who'd been burned more than once by believing the wrong story. I opened the door before he could knock. Thanks for coming, I said. He nodded once. Let's get started. He didn't waste words, didn't offer small talk or ask about the weather. He walked through the front door like someone entering evidence, eyes sharp but quiet, scanning the space with professional disinterest. This is the living room, I said, and the kitchen's just through here. He paused at the threshold of the kitchen, running a hand along the edge of the freshly scrubbed counter. You cleaned recently. Yes, before the last CPS visit. They said the home had concerning conditions. He raised an eyebrow but didn't comment, just opened his folder and began jotting notes. Smoke detectors. All with new batteries. I triple-checked them this morning. He tilted his head toward the hallway. Her bedroom? I hesitated. Yeah, it's this way. The door creaked as I opened it. Lily's room looked exactly the same as the day she left. I hadn't touched a thing. Her drawings still taped to the wall. Her favorite pajamas folded on the edge of the bed. Mr. Whiskers sat alone on her pillow like he'd been waiting. Kessler walked in slowly, eyes scanning from wall to wall. This is a decent room, clean, stable. It's not a palace, but it's home. I swallowed the knot in my throat. That's what I've been trying to say. No one's listened. He crouched beside her bookshelf, fingering the spines of dog-eared children's books. Any history of mental illness in your family? He asked without turning. My mom once had what she called a spell in her 40s, I said, but it was never diagnosed. Why? Because the court records claim you've been emotionally unstable since your husband's death, citing erratic behavior, depressive symptoms, mood swings. I scoffed. I grieved my husband. I cried. I yelled once during a family dinner. They spun it like I was unstable. I call it being human. He stood and nodded. That's what I thought. Back in the living room, he made more notes. This house isn't dangerous, he said. It's lived in. Nothing here screams neglect. Then why did CPS act like I was raising her in a condemned building? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked around the space again, more slowly this time. Less like a prosecutor. More like a father, if I had to guess. Then finally, he said, because someone wanted them to see it that way. I folded my arms. So what now? He closed the folder and looked at me, finally meeting my eyes. Now I find out who's lying, and when I do, I don't care if it's a board member, a judge, or a retired schoolteacher in a pearls and sweater set. I will drag the truth into daylight. For the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't dared let myself feel. Hope. Not the fragile kind that slips through your fingers. The kind that makes you stand up a little taller and remember who you are. He started toward the door but paused. Ms. Monroe, he said, glancing back. Next time someone tries to make you feel small for falling apart, remind them that even a house needs to crack before it gets rebuilt. And with that, he was gone. It started with a spreadsheet. Not a dramatic confrontation or a last-minute discovery. Just a quiet line in a digital file Daniel Kessler found buried inside a quarterly report from the investment firm where my father sat on the board. The trust fund. $2.2 million, sitting quietly in a portfolio labeled L. Monroe Beneficiary Trust. Disbursement clauses. Legal conditions. Co-trusteeship. But the real shock wasn't the money itself. It was the name listed in the advisory notes at the bottom. Filed by Marvin Royce, same man who'd made the anonymous CPS complaint. Found him, Kessler said over the phone, his voice like steel. Your father didn't just know Marvin Royce. They've been connected for over a decade. Royce sits on the compliance committee of Paul Monroe Capital. I pressed the phone to my ear. So they coordinated it, officially. It looks that way. Royce submitted the anonymous complaint. Your father filed the custody motion days later. And here's the kicker. If you're declared permanently unfit, your father becomes the sole trustee of the fund, with no one to challenge financial decisions. I closed my eyes, breath catching. They planned this. They built it. 3 days later, Kessler subpoenaed Royce for a formal deposition. I wasn't allowed in the room, but I sat in the hallway outside the prosecutor's office, listening to the muffled voices rise and fall behind the frosted glass door. It took less than 20 minutes for things to get loud. I'm not under criminal investigation, Royce barked. You might be, Kessler replied calmly. If you knowingly submitted a fraudulent claim to a government agency to initiate custody proceedings for financial gain, that's fraud and perjury, and possibly conspiracy to defraud the court. I was acting out of concern, Royce snapped. The girl mentioned bruises. Except her pediatrician never reported anything. The school has no record of injury. And your concern just happens to perfectly align with your colleague's financial interests. That's not concern, Mr. Royce, that's strategy. Silence. Then Kessler's voice again, lower, firmer. Did you think no one would follow the money? There was no answer. After the deposition, Kessler stepped into the hallway and looked at me. He folded. I stood. What does that mean? It means he admitted your father discussed the trust clause with him last fall. That Paul Monroe described you as emotionally fragile and told Royce to file the complaint as a precaution, his exact word. My stomach turned. That's it, right? That proves they manipulated the system. Kessler gave a slow nod. It proves intent, and with Royce's cooperation, I can issue further subpoenas, emails, meeting logs, communications between your parents and CPS. It's going to take time, but... He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Something shifted then. Not in the case, but in me. For weeks I'd been surviving, enduring, barely staying above the waterline, but now I was fighting. Now I had proof. I went home that night and stood in Lily's room for a long time. I didn't cry. I just stared at the tiny plastic T-Rex on her windowsill, still guarding the pillow she used to sleep on. They lied, baby, I whispered into the stillness. But the truth's louder. I was folding laundry when the knock came. It wasn't loud or rushed, just 2 measured raps on the front door like someone who didn't want to scare me. I hesitated, socks still in my hands, my heart racing in that strange way it does when hope feels too dangerous. I opened the door and there they were. Daniel Kessler stood on my porch, his coat slightly damp from the drizzle. But I barely noticed him. Because in his arms, wrapped in a pink coat, cheeks red from the cold, eyes wide and wet, was Lily. She clung to his neck like a vine. One mitten dangled from her wrist. Her hair was messier, longer than I remembered, and she looked smaller somehow, like the weeks away had shrunk her. She's home, Kessler said simply, and my world stopped. I dropped the socks. I didn't care. I was already on my knees, arms outstretched, mouth open in a sob I didn't even try to muffle. Mommy! She leapt from his arms like she'd been waiting for a signal. I caught her in midair, clutched her to my chest so tightly I was afraid I'd crush her, but she didn't seem to mind. She cried into my shoulder, her breath hiccuping against my neck. I missed you, she sobbed. I missed you more, I whispered, rocking us both like I could undo everything. You'll never be taken again, I swear it. I don't know how long we stayed like that. I don't care. Eventually, Kessler stepped back quietly, giving us the moment we'd both been waiting for. She's here under an emergency order, he said softly when I finally looked up. The judge reviewed the new evidence and signed off on immediate reversal. Full custody hearing is in 2 weeks, but unofficially, you're her mother again. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. She's been staying at a temporary placement home, he added. Safe, but she didn't talk much, barely ate, wouldn't let go of this. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out Mr. Whiskers. I gasped. Lily's eyes lit up as she grabbed her stuffed rabbit with both hands. Thank you, I choked out, clutching her tighter. Kessler looked at us and something shifted in his expression, something almost fatherly, almost reverent. "You did what most people don't," he said. "You fought back and you didn't let them scare you quiet." "They tried," I whispered. "They almost did. But they didn't," he said, "and that matters." Before he left, Lily waved at him from the window. "Is that man your friend now?" she asked, wiping her nose with the sleeve of her coat. I smiled, brushing hair from her forehead. "He's someone who listens when no one else does. That's even better." We curled up on the couch together that night. No TV, no distractions. Just her, me, and the sound of her breathing as she fell asleep in my arms like she had before the nightmare began. I didn't move for hours, not even to turn on the lights. I just sat in the dark, holding the most important person in my world, finally safe again. And when I did eventually carry her to bed, she whispered, half asleep, "You didn't let them win." I kissed her forehead. "I never will." The headlines came first. "Investment advisor under investigation for CPS manipulation. $2.2 million trust tied to fraudulent custody filing. Suffolk County prosecutor uncovers abuse of Child Protective Services." For the first time in this whole nightmare, I wasn't the one being scrutinized. I wasn't the problem. Paul Monroe's name appeared on every article. Phrases like abuse of power, financial motive, and unethical manipulation of court channels trailed behind his name like a cloud of smoke. Nancy never gave a public statement, but I heard through a neighbor that she hadn't been to her book club since the investigation began, that she stopped wearing her pearls. That someone had seen her crying in the parking lot of the country club. I didn't feel satisfaction, just clarity. When the official ruling came down from family court, I didn't even cry. I sat quietly in the back of the courtroom as the judge read it aloud. Full parental custody restored to Julia Monroe. Trust fund authority to be reassigned. Petitioners found to have submitted misleading and incomplete affidavits. CPS to undergo internal review. Case closed. The gavel fell like punctuation. I squeezed Lily's hand beside me. She was coloring with a pink marker on the back of the judge's itinerary, humming to herself, completely unaware that her future had just been sealed back into my arms. And then it happened. Kessler, standing behind me, leaned in and said quietly, "Would you consider telling your story at the legal reform hearing next month? The state's reviewing how CPS cases are initiated. Your voice could change things." I looked at him uncertain. "I'm not a public speaker," I said. "I'm just a mom." He smiled. "Exactly, that's why they'll listen." And so 1 month later, I stood behind a polished podium in Albany. The room was filled with state officials, CPS directors, family law advocates. Cameras recorded every word. I wore a navy blue blazer I borrowed from a friend and clutched a folded photo of Lily in my palm like a shield. "My name is Julia Monroe," I began. "And 6 weeks ago I was told I wasn't fit to be a mother, not because I was dangerous or negligent, but because I was inconvenient to someone else's plan." Every head turned. "I want you to know how easy it was for them," I continued. "All it took was one phone call, one complaint, one affidavit, and I lost my child overnight." I didn't cry. I didn't falter. "I want you to imagine your child being handed off to someone else because someone filed paperwork faster than you could defend yourself. That's what this system allowed. That's what I survived." I finished with a promise. "Let no mother be treated like this again, not on your watch." The room was silent when I stepped down, but a few people stood, then more. A quiet standing ovation, not for a victory, but for a voice finally heard. After the hearing, I walked outside and called Lily. "Are you being famous?" she asked, giggling. I laughed. "Just telling our story." "Tell them I'm really happy now," she said. "Tell them I want to stay with you forever." "I will," I said softly. "I promise." 1 year later, the garden had started to grow. Not perfectly, there were still weeds, still bugs that nibbled at the leaves, still tomatoes that ripened too quickly and burst, but it was ours. And that made all the difference. Lily knelt beside me under the old elm tree in the backyard, her hair tucked under a floppy straw hat I bought her from the hardware store. She dug into the soil with her tiny trowel, humming off-key, her voice rising like birdsong above the quiet rustle of wind through the trees. "Do tomatoes like music?" she asked seriously. I smiled, brushing soil from my hands. Only if you sing with love. She considered that for a moment. Then ours will be the best tomatoes in New York. I laughed. They already are. The backyard hadn't changed much since everything happened. The same patchy grass, the same rusted grill in the corner. But now there was something new, something fragile but rooted. Peace. After the hearing in Albany, Kessler's audits rippled across the state. 2 CPS employees were quietly reassigned. A judge who had greenlit emergency removals too easily was formally censured. And a new policy was passed, requiring anonymous complaints to undergo additional scrutiny before any child could be taken. Small wins, but real ones. I no longer looked over my shoulder when Lily ran into the yard. No longer jumped when a letter arrived in the mail. And when my mother called last December, just once to say Merry Christmas, I let it ring. Then I blocked the number. Some bridges are better as ashes. Lily leaned back on her heels and held up a worm. This one's the mayor, she declared. The mayor of the garden, I nodded solemnly. Tell him we appreciate his service. She giggled and placed the worm gently back in the dirt. Mom, she said suddenly, squinting at the sky. Yeah, baby. Will the garden always be ours? Her voice was so small, so honest. It caught me off guard. I knelt beside her, brushing a smudge of dirt from her cheek. Yes, sweetheart, I said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. No one can take anything from us ever again. She smiled, satisfied, then went back to humming. That night, after she'd fallen asleep with dirt under her nails and sunburn on her nose, I stood at the kitchen sink and looked out at the yard. The elm tree swayed gently. The tomato stakes leaned slightly in the wind. The garden beds glowed faintly under the moonlight like stitched scars that had healed with time. This house, this life wasn't perfect, but it was real. It was honest. It was mine. And Lily's. And no one, not even the people who once held the power to take her, would ever rewrite that again. If you stayed with me through every moment of this story, thank you. If you cried with Julia, feared with her, and fought in spirit beside her, thank you. And if you've ever had something taken from you, only to rise up and reclaim it, then I hope this story reminds you. You were never meant to stay broken. Please comment below, what part of Julia's journey stayed with you most? And don't forget to like and share if this story moved you. Let's make sure no one else feels silenced again. Thank you for listening. Until next time.